Hey, everybody. This is Chris. Hey, Al, what time is it?
Chris, it's time for another Readiness Rewired podcast. And this one we're gonna have a session that includes our TEDCon conference where we did a live podcast, but we'll get into that in a little bit.
It's been a full summer. Hey, Mike, are you on? Are you back?
I'm on. Yeah, man, I'm back. It's been kind of a relaxing summer. It sounds like you guys have been working a little bit more than I have.
Yeah, Al, what's been going on this summer?
Well, you guys might have taken a little bit more time off, but in my area, we had the Big 7 race again this year, and we set up a medical tent with about 120 medical volunteers to handle that race for about 16,000 runners. And it was another great year. We had a beautiful weather, and it's a fun time. I enjoy it every year. Gosh, we've done this for many, many years, but we have about 3 months of planning that goes into it to fine tune everything. Every year, something comes up a little different.
Maybe another podcast, but hey, Mike and I weren't totally without activity this summer. Mike, we managed to get over to Cedar Rapids and do a little bomb threat prevention workshop. I think Al was there, although he was napping.
No, I was paying attention, but that's okay. You guys go ahead.
Well, it looked like your eyes were closed. You might have been doing some meditating, reflecting. But in addition to the bomb threat workshop, we actually took Readiness Rewired and all of our stuff on the road.
Yeah, it sounds like you worked with our local healthcare coalition group, and they had a bomb threat workshop done by the feds, and you can talk more about that group. And well attended, had some folks online, and then we took our podcast on the road up to those folks and did kind of a test run of what it would be like to do this on site. And we learned a lot of interesting things. And yeah, it was an important topic on how hospitals and major, healthcare infrastructure could sort of reinforce themselves when it came to dealing with potential bomb threats. So that was a good option, good thing for us to do.
So they did a bomb threat workshop with some healthcare providers, both remote and in the room. And then afterwards, we had that conversation and tested out our multi-person remote podcasting. Al was there. Al, any thoughts about the conference?
Well,
and I mean, not the conference, but the workshop they had.
I'm really glad I went because it opened up my eyes to what they could do from a training and education standpoint. And I have now gone back, and since I'm still a little bit active in some of the stuff, I want to bring those guys into a couple different areas that I'm still involved with and get them to do that presentation again, because I thought the education and the presentation and the tabletop that they did were excellent.
Yeah. And that came out of the Office of Bomb Prevention, a federal office, and some regional folks and a contractor, I think, that presented that. But we had an even bigger adventure this summer, a little bit after that, didn't we?
Well, I was very pleased. You guys accepted an invitation from me to come down and speak at the Peoria TEDCon conference, which again is the Traumas, Emergencies, and Disasters conference they do every year down there. And you guys came down and knocked it out of the park as two of our breakout speakers. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, Mike and I had the opportunity to actually visit with some of the folks in Illinois and share some thoughts. I think I was talking on incident command at more of a local level and some opportunities to maybe rethink and reimagine that. Mike, what did you share with them?
Yeah, well, the nice folks down there stuck me in the public health track, which was great because, I mean, geez, talk about a great conference. Those people down there, Region 2, OSF folks, that's the Order of St. Francis. Those folks are really pros at putting on a great conference. There was about, 300 people or so there at the conference.
Correct.
Total.
Yep.
Yeah, and so I did the public health track, and that was, it was something I wanted to raise. I wanted to talk about the 4 kind of major infectious disease outbreaks that at least I had to deal with. I know you guys did too during my tenure in emergency management. And then I basically spoke from the perspective of me building with our team in our facility a CDC and NETEC verified biocontainment unit. So I kind of wanted to speak from those perspectives on how healthcare should prepare in the future and what we learned from those four things. I think I discussed H1N1, MERS, Ebola, and then, of course, COVID-19. And so I wasn't ridden out of town on a rail, so I don't think I said anything that made anybody too upset. But I also didn't pull any punches either on what we didn't do so good and what we need to do in the future.
Hey, Mike, CDC, Centers for Disease Control, and then NETEC. Do you remember what they've rebranded themselves? What that acronym was for?
It used to be National Ebola Treatment and Education Center. Now it's National Emerging Special Pathogens Treatment and Education Center.
Gotcha. Wow. And Al, you were part of a planning group on this. How'd the conference come off in general?
I was, and every year, as Mike said, they just really do a great job. The team down there, and I was very happy to be a part of that. They just do a great job, and it was a great conference. We had a nice turnout, and they're looking forward. We're already planning for next year already. We've already had a discussion.
So, in addition to the two sessions that Mike and I presented, all three of us took the Readiness Rewired live, and to further complicate it, brought three guests on. And we always rely on Mike to help us with the technical sides of stuff. Mike, no small challenge, huh?
Well, yeah, and less than ideal studio conditions when you do something remote. But what we've got are probably good 10 real nice sort of highlight clips of our three guests that we had, and we'll put those as we follow up with this particular session, so you can kind of hear some of the great content that came from our three guests.
Al, who were they?
Yeah, let me let everybody know who our three guests were. We had Matt Ringenberg, and Matt is the emergency response coordinator for the Illinois Department of Public Health. And with him was Jason Marks. Jason is the director of emergency preparedness with the Peoria County Health Department. And those two guys were really our public health guys talking about the issues that were going on. We had some discussions with them. And to keep things even, because three Iowa boys here doing a podcast, we want to make sure that Illinois wasn't pulling the wool over our eyes and fluffing it a little bit. We brought in our old buddy Troy Erbentraut to kind of be the watchdog and hold up that bullshit card if anything was going south. But Troy was the former Region 2 Director of Emergency Preparedness, and now he moved down to Texas with the Southeast Texas Regional Advisory Council. So Troy was back for the conference as well, and the three of them had some great comments that I was glad we put that session on.
And Troy helped out a lot too in doing some compare and contrast, as he's been down to Houston area now for about a year and been through a hurricane and some heavy rains and power outages and some of the stuff going down in Texas, and lent some real insight into some of the regional differences between, say, the Midwest and Texas. So I think people will get some good stuff out of it in this highlight reel, if you will, that Mike's helped us put together.
Yeah, so what you're going to see following our session here are 10 highlight reel clips of what our guests were basically telling the crowd in the room in response to some questions that we posed and then some questions that the audience posed. And so, I think it's going to be an interesting listen. So stay tuned, everybody. Keep going with the video here. And as you see each clip, you'll see our lovely faces that were produced by our cartoon expert, Chris, here. And then you'll hear the essential topic that was raised in the next clip. And then you'll be able to watch that clip and see what our guests have to say. So I think those would be some valuable information. Stay tuned and keep going.
And we'll rejoin you at the end, the three of us, for some closeout comments.
All right, here we go.
So on these upcoming clips, as you're looking at it, on your left is Jason Marks. Right in the middle is Matt Ringenberg. And you might recognize Troy from a previous episode, but Troy is on your right. So as you watch the clips, that's who you're listening to. Great guys.
I'm caught off guard by Troy being the guardrails for this conversation, so that's a curveball.
I was finding my bullshit flags. I start waving what I was doing. Yeah.
In this first clip, Troy is asked to compare and contrast his preparedness and response experience in central Illinois to where he is at currently in Texas.
So, yeah, anybody who live on a Gulf Coast, East Coast? No? Hurricanes are real. Tornadoes scare the shit out of folks. And this used to scare the shit out of me, you know? And the thing about a tornado is, you know, the little buzzer, the bell will go off in the middle of the night, or the siren, or your alarm, or whatever it is you're doing. And about 4 to 7 minutes later, you know, something either happens or doesn't happen. And then about 15 or 20 minutes after that, you're looking at some debris in your field if it impacted you, right? This short window of time. If you've never been through a hurricane, and this was not a horrible hurricane, Hurricane Beryl was the last one that came through. It lasts like, I don't know, the wind blew about 84, 82 miles an hour at my house for about 3.5 hours. And if you think about that, like, you know what I mean? Like we could all talk about that. You can be like, oh, that really sucks. But until you're there and you watch your trees all bend over and shit, your fence blow away and all your shit goes and it's raining sideways, you're like, boy, when's this gonna stop? Like, this really sucks. That's the one thing I will say is the difference is hurricanes are, until you live through one, it's a little different. So, and our response in Texas is a little different than any place else I've been.
Can I interrupt him about weather?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Don't interrupt, but go ahead.
I will. Because actually, the first thing I told him when I saw him yesterday, I didn't realize he was going to be here, is that, correct me if I'm wrong, but the weather here's been beautiful for like a week, 2 weeks. If the weather goes to hell on us, we know why.
I will say that about Houston too. So I'm in the Houston area and I work for the Southeast Texas Regional Advisory Council. So Texas is divided into RACs, very similar to the state of Illinois is divided into RHCC regions. There's some slight differences, like for John now and these guys that work in the Region 2, I think there's 20 hospitals in Region 2, and there's 186 hospitals in our RAC. So 8 counties and 186 hospitals. Over 800 nursing home and long-term care facilities. So, I mean, there's a slight difference in that. I thought I was really busy when we had 24 hospitals to deal with, and to have 186 is a little mind-blowing. But other than that, the last thing I'll say, we can start getting questions and get to some meat of this, is Houston is hot, and that heat is real. So it's not a great place to visit unless you like to live on the surface of the sun. Why I went to Houston, I'm not a smart man. You'll figure that out as you ask questions today, and I can give you answers. I don't really know. Outside of moving out of Illinois to Texas, there's some things, you know, freedom differences and things like that. Politics are a little different from Illinois to Texas. But other than that, the weather is, the last thing I'll tell you, I guess I'm rambling here a little bit. That's what I do. So most cities on the coast, on the eastern seaboard of Texas, have no drainage. So the way they build the city is they drain all the floodwaters into the streets. That's by design. So if you're driving through Texas or any place and you'll see these underpasses over a road or whatever, they build those to intentionally flood them. So you'll see these horrific pictures. Like, even I live in a neighborhood, and our street was about that full of water, and it's by design. And like 4 or 5 minutes later, then it'll all flow into the whatever. But you can't build ditches. You don't have drainage. You don't have sewer drains, storm drains. You have sewer drains. You don't have storm drains. So they build all these roads like that. That's something that I couldn't get my head wrapped around at first. So, like, it rains a little bit, and all of a sudden, all the streets are flooded. And you're like, what the hell's going on with this town, you know? But it's built like that. So you get half inch of rain, and it'll just flood all the streets, and then 20 minutes later, it goes away. I'm from Illinois. We have ditches, and you know what I mean? So there's storm drains, and like, I'd never seen anything like that. But that's how they do it there, and it's a little crazy. And the driver sucks. The Texas driver sucks. So.
In this second clip, Troy is asked to define the acronym RAC as it's used in Texas.
Regional Advisory Council. So the RACs and the RHCCs are very similar in their design. They both are funded through Hospital Preparedness Program. The difference here is, like, Matt is on the FEP side. There's There's not as built, the public health emergency preparedness isn't built the same way in Texas that it is in Illinois. So the FET and HPP in Illinois, I don't want to say they're different because they run on same tracks parallel to each other and they do a lot of similar work. In Texas, the RAC takes a lot more of that responsibility, both sides of that. So the regional advisory councils, and they've been around since, I want to say, early 90s. So they were even ahead of some of the stuff in Illinois. I don't know, when would we do, 99 maybe, 2000, 2001?
In that coalition direction that way.
So the RACs preceded that. The RACs in Texas were done prior to that. So.
In this third clip, Troy discusses the differences he's seen in disaster response down in Texas compared to his experience in the Midwest, and leads a discussion on personal preparedness responsibility.
Well, I told some stories yesterday, and I'll say this. The biggest thing, and I repeat this a lot, but it means a lot. So 20 plus years I did preparedness in the state of Illinois, and the one difference, the huge difference, which has to do with response and how we do emergency management in Texas, is the support from the state to respond to crises and disasters. So the state of Texas will pay a bill, will support stuff, will figure out how to do things. There's no challenge unmet. There's nothing ever done. And I'm not saying Illinois doesn't support preparedness. I'm not saying Illinois doesn't do it. But in my experience in Illinois, we were always worried about dollars and cents. We were always worried about how we're going to do this, what we're going to pay for that, how we're going to fund this. If this gets broken, what are we going to do? There's funding mechanisms. And that became forefront because, rightfully so, you have to, preparedness costs money to do. To be a prepared organization, to be a prepared health department, hospital, county, whatever, city, it costs money to do that. And those monies are the what if monies, you know what I mean? It's not, there's no way to quantify the ROI on that. There's no way to generate revenue off preparedness. So it's money spent for the what ifs in the world. Texas is in my opinion, and for this podcast, just to build a difference, Texas just spends money on preparedness. So Hurricane Beryl, what we put on standby days before landfall was paramedic coach buses, which is a concept I'd never heard of. So they implement a contract with a coach bus company like Pure Charter Coach. They put those buses on high ground in dry areas and put a paramedic team on them. So if someplace had to evacuate, they can roll a coach bus in, put 50 people on it. They're overseen by a paramedic, and you can move them somewhere else. So it's a fast way to move 50 people all in one time. That's for those medics in the room, EMS folks, you're looking like, well, how can you legally do that? Well, the governor's office will put, we'll sign papers and say, yep, we can put a paramedic on a coach bus. It becomes a licensed paramedic coach bus, or not licensed, but it becomes an acceptable paramedic coach bus. The state of Texas also has AMB buses. If you know this concept, it originally started a number of years ago with a school bus. And what the school bus did was they retrofitted, took the seats out, put cots and stretchers in. They double stacked them. Like if you've seen that, how that goes into a C-130 or the Department of Defense assets. So we can put about 18 people in the old Type 1 or Type 1.5 ambulance, and the Type 2 ambulance holds about 20, give or take. It'll hold 9 isolates, but it's a big truck, like you look at a school bus type item. It can roll into a hospital or nursing home. You can load 20 people, non-ambulatory folks in there, and you can roll them to another hospital if you had to evacuate. And then, so I started by this day, and they put these on standby 2 days prior to landfall. So what we had in the Houston area on standby, paid for by the state of Texas, 86 ambulances, 8 AM buses, 4 paramedic coach buses, ambulance strike team leaders, task force leaders, and Texas developed a position called a MIST, which is a medical incident support team member, which are these folks are typically EMS folks or hospital folks that take some additional training that can go help with evacuation or help with hospital incident management or help with emergency operations center, all based on the health and medical side. And we had 24 MIST team members. But those were all put on standby, so they pay them to wait. Like one of them was one whole team was at Texas A&M in College Station at the Rella Station, and they just pay them to wait. So that's a big difference to me. Is I've never been in a position outside of where I'm at now where we would pre-deploy resources that cost a ton of money to do for the what if and wait to see if this thing hits landfall. Because the original, and I'll stop, I promise, but the original Beryl wasn't supposed to hit Houston, it was supposed to hit the Corpus area. And it kind of shifted in the Gulf, and it kind of stalled a little bit, waited, and then it ended up hitting a little farther north and took Houston and north of Houston. So that, to answer your question specifically, is the one thing is the the ability of Texas to leverage resources to pregame a disaster. Even like there's the eight World Cup games are coming in the Houston, Texas area next year. I think it's 25, maybe. I think the World Cup's coming. This is 26. We're already started that planning, and they're looking at pre-deploying resources for that too. So they'll build some medical shelter areas. They'll do some things pre-game for that, which is all cost money, but they're willing to do that preparedness side of things. So,
can I follow up on that? So, how long were we down there? You've been down there for what? 2 years? A year. Yeah. So, not exactly seasoned in terms of Texas.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not trying to claim it.
No, that's
for the record. My disclaimer: I've been there 1 year, so I'm not a Texan. I don't know all the little lingo and I don't know the horse.
If there's that big thorn in the fire of a year on the job and then having to deal with a huge hurricane, so I'm just curious, what are things that you brought from Illinois, either from a program standpoint or in 20 years of experience in dealing here that served you or the communities well down there? Is there anything that jumps out that you thought, man, this was good from coming back and or at least having the experience in conducting these things in Illinois?
I'll say I don't know how many emergency managers are, what your guys' professions are here, but emergency management, like running an incident in the emergency operations center is running an incident in the emergency operations center. But Texas does things a little different, sure, and I think it's by design. So those folks, and again, I'm not trying to be pro, anti, or any of that stuff, but if you ever been to Texas, know somebody that's born and raised in Texas, there is something to be true. They are proud to be Texans. Like they are 100% proud to be Texans. And I'll challenge you here, when we leave out of here, go look for somebody that has an Illinois flag at their house or on their truck or branded on their body somewhere, you know what I mean? You just be hard pressed to find somebody that's sporting an Illinois flag. You drive to Texas, you've been to Texas for like 3 minutes and you haven't seen somebody with a Texas tattoo on them, wearing a Texas shirt, have a truck on their flag or on their home or painted on something. You just forgot to open your eyes for 3 minutes you've been to Texas because they are everywhere. They are super proud to be Texans. So some of that is in my year, I have not been able to like embed anything from Illinois. I think there's some practices that we do well. I'm not trying to say that we don't, but I've never been through a hurricane. I've been through 2 of them now. We had a derecho, straight line windstorm that did some damage. We had tornadoes that went through, so I was familiar with that. The response to that's very similar to the way we respond here. The NCAA World Championship game was done in Houston, so I sat through the EOC in that. So I've been in 1 year, 12 months, I've probably spent a month and a half setting in an EOC. So I haven't had a lot of opportunity to be like, hey, we should work on some best practices. Sure. We should take some stuff around. I'm still trying to learn. Texas law is different. There's some stuff like that I'm still playing catch up for.
So to take that a little further, let me ask, because I think this is a conversation we had before you left to Texas, a lot about being in the Midwest and our struggle with planning and preparing. Yep. And have you found that not only the agencies down there are more willing to prepare, probably because they're more likely to deal with emergency and disaster, but the public as well? Because we had a lot of conversations before Troy went, And as emergency manager, I'll be honest, sometimes I feel jealous of my counterparts that work in the Gulf Coast or certain parts of the country that deal with emergencies and disasters on a more routine basis. And then there are other days I'm like, man, I love going fishing this weekend. And so that's what I'm wondering, can you tell the difference between living in a geographic region of the nation where disasters happen every year, multiple disasters, and an area of the nation where we may have a flood, we might have a tornado, but
No, some of their programs are built better. Like they have a steer program in Texas where you can self-register if you are medically fragile, right? And then there's some Texas law that says if you register on the steer program, then you're required to make touch to you. So they try 2 phone calls. If you don't answer your phone, they'll send EMS to your house, right? Because you self-registered. So there's still those folks that do, but in a community like the Houston greater area is 5 million plus people. People still suck. And that's the truth, right? So those that have been in emergency management, that's as factual as it gets. Individually, you can like a lot of folks. You get folks together in a group, they all suck. And the problem is there's still people like in the Gulf Coast area that have hurricanes. It's going to happen. Flooding's going to happen. You know what I mean? It's hot. And there's still people that don't take care of themselves. There's still people that don't do preparedness, don't put forward the effort or doing that. Power outages are a big deal around our area just because of those winds and that kind of thing. And you'll still have somebody that's actually dependent. on a generator, something like, an O2 generator, power goes out and they wait till they're like at the 911 call comes in and says, I got 3.5 minutes of oxygen left and I'm gonna quit breathing, and you're like, why wouldn't you call us 20 minutes ago? Like when we had some time to get there. But so no, it's the same way. In that aspect, Jason, no. I mean, people still don't. I think it's a United States problem that people don't prepare for things that we know. Even though, like, you live in Illinois, we should all have weather radios. And please don't raise your hands because it gives me anxiety if somebody says. But I used to do this when I was here. Like, how many folks have weather radios? And I used to get all the time. Well, I have my phone; it'll do things. And like, so we don't buy like $28 or $12, whatever weather radio costs. We don't buy that to put in our house. It's a level preparedness, base level preparedness. We'll do that when we know there's tornadoes going to rip through Central. We know there's going to happen, right? Even though no matter how much empirical data you tell people that tornadoes will jump this river and cities don't matter and they'll rip through anything and they don't really direction, they'll be like, well, it doesn't happen here because we have enough blacktop which creates heat vectors and it moves them. That's all BS, you know what I mean? But yet we still believe that garbage. And then you move into a place like Texas where they have known power outages, there's hurricanes that are coming, and you would think, oh, these folks have this preparedness built and whipped and all this, and they're like, nope, we didn't do none of that. I didn't think about that. I should have thought about how I'm going to breathe, So that's still frustrating, and I say it in jest a little bit, but I think just as Americans, we have issues with taking personal responsibility. That's just my belief bias, and that's me talking Troy, saying that, boy, it would make our jobs, everybody's job in preparedness or healthcare or public health a lot better if we had some own responsibility. You know what I mean? We took some responsibility on a little bit of preparedness for the reason. So no different.
In this fourth clip, there's considerable discussion on where the lay public gets their information about disaster response and how we could potentially change their behaviors and the challenges that social media presents.
Can I interrupt you? Are you saying that my fellow guy's not an expert? Is this the first time I'm hearing this? I'm changing podcasts right now. I just learned something. Just saying,
You're right. We spoke earlier about behavior and changing behaviors. I think that's a lot of what we're trying to do in emergency management and changing behaviors. And even with respect to, and the topic, we could go on and on with misinformation, malinformation. And I think one of the things that I struggle with behaviors is, and the science, and trusting the science was this whole adage. I thought throughout the entire pandemic, I kept going back to people. I can't believe the number of people forgot like first and second grade science, like when we learned about how science even works, and then it changes. And that just because we hear a message today and it changes tomorrow, that all of a sudden the person who gave me the message the day before didn't know what they were talking about, And so I think that's behavioral based. I think it goes into a lot about, one, how we get information anymore. We talked a little bit. I've used for a while. We all deal with information overload, in my opinion. We get information 24/7 via our phones, through all these methods. And my personal opinion, I'm not an expert in the brain. I believe our brain has the ability to utilize all that information. I'm just not so sure we figured out how to make our brain do it yet, because our brain's supposed to be like, do all these amazing things we don't even know it can. And I think it's information overload, and we get sucked into behaviorally based. What happened to old science? Troy used to always say, what happened to the snow shovels from last year when we had the first blizzard? And I kept saying that during the pandemic. What happened to, I have a sign in our office at work, and it says, if you cannot question it, it's not science, it's propaganda.
Yeah.
And that's behavioral based.
That's pretty good. It's really pretty good.
That's my opinion. That's science. You have to be able to question things, and we have to be able to accept the fact that they're going to change. And I think it's behavioral based. We're being designed over a period of time, and we can go into how and why our behaviors change our behaviors. And some of those are positive ways, and some of them not so positive.
Well, I know Matt's the expert here, and we should give him an opportunity if you want.
Thanks for that.
Yeah. I wanted to say something. I want to say, to Jason's point, I blame social media. And I know that some people that are big social media will say it, but I believe social media has built this monster, right? So when I was a kid, so we're part of the said individual people I like, groups of people. So anyway, so I believe social media created this monster, and we don't know how to deal with it. I think that's like Jason alluded to this, and I buy into this because when I was a kid, we watched the news in our house, and we watched it every night at dinner time. But that news was what happened yesterday. So no one had a visceral reaction to it because it was yesterday something happened. Yesterday something happened, and it educated you on that, and it built some model preparedness. Today, right now, as we sit in this room, if there's an active shooter in Southern California, your all phones will go off and let you know. I will be the first one to let you know. There's no threat to you in Peoria, Illinois, if there's someone shooting in Southern California. But we want to know immediately that that shit's happening, and it creates fear and anxiety in us. Do we really need to know that right now? I mean, I think Jason's right. We can process that. The human brain's an amazing thing, and you could go through that. But do we really have the capacity and capability to not only process that mentally, but process that emotionally? So you start to get this where you're starting to have this emotion and mental thing, and you can't figure out what I'm fearful of, what I'm scared of, what I should listen to, what I won't listen to. Then the other side of social media is you can be any clown. Look at us up here. You know what I mean? I'm talking about maybe me individually. But you could talk in front of any group. And if the 4 people that are out there on the web listening to this, or 40 or 400 or 4,000, whatever it is, and we say that the Pello guy is the genius, right? There's somebody of that group that's going to listen to that and all of a sudden become the My Pello guy is the expert on everything. When this crazy dude says some shit tomorrow, like, nope, he's the guy, he's the genius, So that's the other problem is there's so many facets and or so many facets and tunnels that you can get information from that it's really difficult, even if you're on top of your game and you're, really want to believe in science. But I have scientists, I have Bill Nye telling me something, you know what I mean? And then I have somebody else tell me something else. And it's hard for me to know, I don't know which one's right,
In this 5th clip, there's additional discussion on where the public gets their information during disasters, how they know who to believe, and how perhaps government should use sociologists and behavioral health staff when constructing messaging.
There are people out there trying to. I mean, we talked a little bit prior to that there are about where is that point where an individual makes a decision that I'm going to do something to prepare for this potential incident happening, whether or not it be a tornado or whether or not quit a bad habit or whatever it may be, to improve your healthy lifestyle. And there are people studying, trying to figure out where, because we don't, I mean, ideally we would know that.
We have decision making.
Sociologists, and that's where we've had some discussions locally of involving and engaging more sociologists, more behavioral health people into our world of emergency management. Because again, I think ultimately when I'm trying to change behaviors, I should be trying to. Due to grant reasons, I spend far much more time documenting and doing stuff that's probably not as productive. But that's also
so really the goal is right? Isn't that the
He's got a TikTok channel.
yeah. What if I could socially influence people? Emergency management only one of those ways.
In clip 6, both Matt and Jason expand on the challenges of messaging during a disaster and discuss possible positive outcomes following the COVID-19 pandemic.
So I think both of them have hit on it, right? I mean, there is a lot of public education and communication that goes into any kind of public health, healthcare type of issue. They're very complex networks, so they're not easy problems, and there are no easy solutions when it comes to any of these things. You think about something like COVID. If we were talking about an infectious disease response in a vacuum, that in and of itself is a complex medical issue. It's a complex public health response. But then you layer on just the scope and scale of COVID and the reach that it had in other areas of life with economy and politics. I mean, for the first time in my career, public health issues were on the forefront of presidential and gubernatorial and local, and it was in every level of politics. So just those types of differences, I think makes it very challenging when you're talking to convince one person, let alone, for the state of Illinois, 12 million people you're trying to get kind of moving in the same direction. And again, we kind of talked earlier, just back to this Twitter point, we've got 2 great experts up here, and they come from a field of many experts that that often do their best to get the right messaging out, to get the most recent data, get the most up-to-date, policies and information out. But again, they get that 30 seconds on the news at nighttime, and we've got certain people. I won't mention any pillows that are being sold, but you just got people that are out there, spreading whatever information they have, and so not only combating that, but also harnessing some of those and understanding the reason those those social medias and those people that fill that void, I think, are out there is because there might be a void in the information, whether that's just the lack of knowledge. In the case of COVID, with a novel influenza, things are changing every day. So there's not an immediate response that you can just, the data today does not give you a response that you can put on the news tonight. There's time. It takes time to digest that. It takes time to implement those things. So I think Jason's group here in the Peoria area, between a couple counties here in the area, they had all throughout COVID had a very consistent public messaging strategy. Their administrators, they had infectious disease doctors that were up there. Did a routine, regular update to the community, both to the members, to the media, those types of folks. So, for me, looking out and watching that from the outside, I thought it was incredible that they had a team of experts. It wasn't one person that was, sweating behind the microphone and trying to answer all the questions. They had a team of experts to say that. I think that does two things. It lends credibility to the message that they're saying, and also, the other big issue that I know we faced during COVID was, it's, with it being so new, it's very difficult for us in public health, certainly in the medical community, I would imagine, to say, we just don't know right now. In the beginning of this, we didn't know. It's tough for one person to sit up here and say, I don't know. But when there's a team saying, look, this is new, we're digesting the data, we're on top of it as much as we can, we've got this team coming together, I think it lends credibility and gives some opportunity for even the experts to say, we don't know, but we've got the right people working on it. So I thought those were good elements that I know. I live in this area, so I was heavily involved in the media watching of that. And I thought they did a great job of keeping the message consistent, admitting where there was gaps in their knowledge, but staying consistent and relevant and staying out there and giving people trusted faces to look to. So I think all of those elements, in my opinion, watching the community and how they reacted, I thought those were huge elements in really bringing some legitimacy to our response efforts here in the community.
In clip 7, both Matt and Jason discussed the challenges of public health utilizing its authority to mandate certain behaviors for the good of the general public, and how the general public sometimes pushes back, and how we could potentially change that in the future.
I think one of the positives, my opinion, is that I think it's going back to behaviors. I think it's more, it's accepted, or we don't look at people so strange anymore when you see somebody wearing a mask in public. Where it used to be before the pandemic, if somebody's wearing a mask before public, yeah, I mean, I think there was a stigma with it personally. They either was an issue, or where now it's just more common. I think it's more acceptable, and I think people are more willing to, individuals that maybe feel like, hey, I need to do something to protect myself because of, for whatever reasons, they feel more comfortable wearing a mask in public. I think that's, I think with that positive, the implementation of non-pharmaceutical interventions, the next time we have to try it, is going to be twice as hard as it was this time in many ways. But I think that a positive has been a behavioral change among many people in the public that underneath the right circumstances, that's a preventive measure that's acceptable and successful.
Clip 8, the discussion revolves around the challenges of maintaining interagency relationships, with staff turnover and continuous rebuilding having to be done.
Oh, there's another one coming.
I do agree. It is coming.
And it won't be 100 years.
No.
Right. So
I think, I think we realize that there's more than one type of people out there, and they all, we all come from our different perspectives and different environments. So, I think many of those messages hold true, right? It is my responsibility to protect other people as part of the public. That's my responsibility as a citizen. That's my responsibility within a community, not to put the larger community at risk. It's also true, right, to flip that message around, that you're protecting your family in these situations, right? I know that was something that the messaging that was targeting, not your responsibility to the larger community, but keeping your kids safe at home, from yourself, not bringing anything home, and promoting mask and other safety recommendations during that time, and many others. We talk about, here's your opportunity. You can go to work and continue your livelihood, continue to do the masking thing. So I think, maintaining those good and credible messages, but obviously targeting those to the different groups and getting them all out there, right? I mean, social media does provide the opportunity to get several messages out there, not just the 30-second news clip. So staying in tune with those, and really, I think keeping that messaging not only to the broader group, but making it personal to the right touch points for individuals that are going to ultimately have to be the ones that are changing their behaviors, I think is important.
I think another, positive that came out of COVID, and we started in 2012 a public health emergency preparedness coalition in Peoria County, where we had the healthcare systems, emergency management, public health, EMS, coroner's office, kind of an ESFA, emergency support function. 8 groups started meeting 2012, years before we had COVID-19 or the COVID pandemic. And I think that the pandemic affirmed to many of us what the importance of relationships and the importance of planning and preparing was. Because we had our first case. It was Friday, February 13th. I got a phone call. We have our first positive. So, like all of health departments, at the end of the first one, you rendezvous everybody in your building the next day. And we had heated discussions for a week. We had to cancel St. Patrick's Day. Big deal. Right. When that got done, I'll never forget, there was a conference call, myself and the public health administrator, because now this is 3 or 4 days later, so now everything's virtual, right? Because you can't be in the same room with anybody. We had this call, and Monica says, hey, we need to cancel St. Patrick's Day. And the call, it was dead silent. And we were like, is this working? And somebody said, yes, we just now kind of accepted the seriousness of what the situation was when we canceled that. And so I think that's it, is that without the relationships we built up prior to, I talked about Troy and I, and Matt and I, we have relationships, time spent. There were a lot of things we did during the pandemic that were drawn up on a napkin at probably a bar or a restaurant. Honest to goodness, a lot of it. Right.
Clip 8, the discussion revolves around the challenges of maintaining interagency relationships with staff turnover and continuous rebuilding having to be done.
You just answered that question.
Socialize together. That's and right. I think that, and I mentioned to the group or the judge earlier, that that's one of the struggles I'm personally having in, is that we've been moving Troy to Texas, and Matt's roles changed a little bit. We've had a change in leadership at OSF with John joining the team, that we're kind of rebuilding some relationships that we had built for a long time. And that's not a bad thing. It's actually probably going to strengthen our coalition in the long run. But it was relationships. And I think that was one thing that the pandemic, the other thing, it for me, I mean, I appreciated it from day one, but there are a number of my community partners that I talked to today that even then they'll bring it up. They'll mention the fact that, and it was funny. If you were ever in meetings with Troy and I, Matt had the opportunity, maybe some others. I mean, we're friendly, but not all. It wasn't always friendly, was it? And that was, and people would ask about that, but that was because we have relationships, and so the pandemic affirmed the importance of. I know it's a cliche, and I'm fortunate. I do both public health and emergency management in my community, but I'm saddened, to be quite honest with you. The number of public health people I hear in the state of Illinois, and the number of emergency managers I hear in the state of Illinois say, "Why don't talk to the public health department or the EMA?" I mean, I know it's easy for me. I'm the same guy, but it just does not make sense why that does not happen, particularly in, none of our communities are that large if you can't get up and walk across town to go see the other person.
Clip 9, there's further discussion of the importance of intra-agency relationship building, rebuilding, and how difficult that can be in non-personal settings like doing it on Zoom.
And I'll kind of just tack on to Jason's comments with coming out of COVID. I think relationships are big, and in the current environment, that they're even bigger, right? I think COVID, to be blunt, the relationships that were existing, I think COVID did one of two things to relationships. It either strengthened the relationship that you had going in with all the planning that was done. In many cases, it broke relationships that in some cases have not been restored. So I think, those are challenges, and those are going to be ongoing challenges, anywhere. But Jason's right. Relationships being everything in public health emergency management is a cliche for a reason. And we continue to rebuild those relationships through our different stakeholders and communities, and continue to add those relationships on. Just on the COVID front, I'll say it too. Another big, I think, bonus that came out of a positive that came out of the unfortunate of it was our data modernization, right? And it's something that we're still working towards. But our systems, our data collection technology, our work, workplace systems, we're not ready. I think at the local level, at the state level, at the national level. We're used to doing a couple hundred cases of foodborne outbreak or a couple thousand cases of a larger response, not millions upon millions every day. You're getting a whole new data load of so not only do we not have the technology, but in many cases we didn't have the workforce to really digest that. So I think that's something that is a positive that will be continuing to come out of COVID, and we're still working through that because it's not something that you can fix just in a second to turn on technology and hire new people. But the workforce is probably one of the biggest gaps and opportunities that have come out of COVID. To your point, not only did we expose some gaps in the workforce that we knew we had, right, but it really kind of took an event like COVID or like a large emergency to bring those gaps to the forefront and make it something where our community leaders, our community members recognize that it's not just us sitting in office going, we don't think we can do this, right? Well, now it's in the public talk. But workforce, again, it comes also back to you've got the burnout and turnover. You've got just the changing dynamic in healthcare, in public health, right? I mean, the role, I'm sure in healthcare emergency response, I know in some certain frontline healthcare settings, the public health role, just the content that we plan for and respond to, the scenarios, the partners that we do, it is a changing and dynamic discipline, right? So I think the workforce that we're bringing in is and we're targeting to do that at both the state level and at our community levels are really kind of reaching out to fill some of those gaps, not only with the burnout, but bringing in new and fresh blood to be able to do some of the things that we know we're going to be tasked to do in this changing environment.
So I'm gonna circle back to relationships just real fast.
Okay.
We talked about relationships, and Jason made that we may have went after each other in a meeting or whatever and go have lunch together. But I believe the world's changed a little bit with virtual. So what I'll challenge people is we got to get back to in-person meetings, because the way I've built relationships with these guys and the three of you was pre-meeting, post-meeting, the happy hour at Embassy Suites, the reception they did at night. It sure as hell wasn't during that 2-hour meeting we had that we discussed hand washing or whatever the hell we were discussing, right? It's the pre and post to that. It's the stopping by somebody's office to say hello. I feel like now that we've moved to this virtual and everybody thinks it's super easy, I can get in my office, I can jump on a meeting, but we lose that whole relationship thing. So I have 7 meetings with somebody named Bill, but I don't know Bill. When a disaster happens, I have no idea who this guy is besides a little face on a box or a little voice on a phone. We have to figure out a way as the future goes. I'm not anti-virtuality. I don't want you guys to be like this bitch, like, hey, I don't know anything about how the world's moving. But we have to augment that with a way that we can meet people and like shake hands and build a relationship and a friendship and know where those people are at or how they react. that's how we've survived this, even though we've had spats or whatever we've had, is because of all that other work that was done that wasn't meeting time.
Amen.
So
In the last clip, the audience is prompted to ask questions. One came in on the potential use of AI in the future during preparedness activities, and a discussion of what personal preparedness steps everyone should take.
just yell it out, Tommy. Come on.
I won't repeat that. I went to school and bring my pets. No shot. How do you guys, there's a lot of talk about technology. How do you guys see artificial intelligence or AI, and how can we leverage that with emergency management in the future?
Find a new career. Because today you can get a 14-year-old kid to work Claude or whatever the hell they call that thing and write you a 14-page EOP and however long it takes to put things, and that's the way. So those folks in the room, I've been anti-checkbox preparedness since my career here. And I have fought every regulatory agency there is. We need to move away from checkbox preparedness. We cannot have these regulations that says, hey, does Tom have an evacuation plan? And you're like, yep, it does. And when you look at it, no offense, but Tom's evacuation plan was to throw babies out the window. That's a horrible damn plan, you know what I mean? But check the box, you had a plan, so let's move next, you know what I mean? What's the next check box? Yep, he has a fire plan that says when there's red stuff, move away from it, you know what I mean? Like, but those aren't great plans, and they didn't build anything. And I think that's where AI goes, is it's gonna cheapen, for lack of a better term, I have a SAT vocabulary. It's gonna cheapen emergency management. That if I'm tasked with doing a plan, and I know I'm younger than Troy is, and I know how to work this system. There it is. Hey, here's your plan. Done. Right? And is that really a plan? We all know, because we've been through real world disasters and we've experienced stuff. That's not a plan. That's just a paper. Words on paper. Words on paper, you're going to fail 100% of the time.
That goes back. I'll answer his question. His comment goes back to what Eisenhower said about planning is useless, or plans are useless, planning is indispensable. And I think you're right. If we rely on AI to write our plans for us, that's not a good idea. One way I think we're going to use AI in the future in emergency management is, I think, in situational awareness. I think when a large scale event happens, I think AI is we're going to be able to add AI stuff, and it's going to be able to gather what's going on out there for us and help minimize having somebody sit and watch Twitter all day long, or social media, and I think the potential with some of that. But I also think, because it's relationships, and so if somebody tries to use AI to build plans, we talked about it, the relationships, you can't. So, but I think that you can use AI to, just like we all do. I speak to Bradley universities now and then, and you've all been in this boat. Everything they told you about college and plagiarism is a joke when you become an emergency manager, because the first thing I do when I write a new plan is I Google about 9 other counties my size plan. I start working them over, and then we sit and talk about it with my relationship people. This works, doesn't, and we have a plan. But so I think it's a tool, but I agree with Troy. There will be entities, but that's the problem. I'd love to have a conversation about checkboxes. We're agreement. We're focusing a lot of times in our communities on things that are maybe not as important as other things, because we're chasing, and maybe so much for us in Illinois, maybe different other states, maybe Texas differently because of their funding mechanisms. But I'm relying on funding in order to have my program.
You got to do the checkbox.
I got to do, and so 50% of my time has to do funding, and then the other 50% I can better prepare my community.
Yeah, and I'll say, speaking of Bradley, my son is a sophomore at Bradley University in the business program, and one of the tracks.
Yeah, some in the dean's office.
Yeah, I'm sure probably got an award.
Yeah, it was.
So one of the tracks that they have in the business program actually looks into kind of the AI side and the technology side. Again, from a business perspective. So they're not, that within that program, they're not doing the coding, they're not writing the programs. But at the end of the day, somebody at a major corporation has to be able to take that AI and the data and just the information that it gives you and implement that into the workforce, right? At some point, it's going to have to touch a human, to touch other humans, right? So I see that. I think that it's an interesting track that they have in that program for education, and I see that very similarly. I think in our roles moving forward, right? I think there's the opportunities are there to be tremendous, right? With the amount of information and data that's going to be able to pull in, to be able to ability to synthesize data across so many spectrums, right? But at some point, to these guys' point, that checkbox has to come back and say, here's how we're actually going to do this. Here's how I am actually going to do this, right? Or we as a community, to be able to implement that in. And I think that's, again, so what are some pros of that? I think AI and doing a large scale synthesis across thousands of plans across, whatever database it's pulling from, just the jurisdictional data that they pull in. I think, spitting a plan out like that with the checkbox, I think will give us as planners an opportunity to say, wow, there's a lot of things that we had not considered before that clearly are something that's burning across the internet right now, or however we're generating this information. So I think the opportunity to bring those considerations in are there, but it's still going to take us to really kind of, to prioritize that data to make it, something where it fits. We are the people embedded in these communities. So I think the role for us will change, I think, in just the amount of volume of data that we're able to process and make our decisions.
Excellent. We've got 5 minutes. Other questions from the audience?
Can I share the picture that came in my mind when we started talking about AI? Is I saw iRobot, and I'm telling you what, the first time I walk into an EOC, and all the robots are standing in the corner at the coffee maker, they're like, that's when I'm out. And that's when the AI went too far for me down.
Other questions from the audience? Sir.
You mentioned the weather radio. What are some other base level preparedness things that we can do or should have at home that can help during a disaster or emergency?
I'm going to repeat that question. Weather radio is preparedness that people have in their home. What are other examples of baseline preparedness devices, whatever you consider?
I'm going to give these guys, so Texas, this was a big deal. The gas station lines were legit out the driveway, down the road, and impeded traffic. Like, you couldn't get to a gas. It took you 2 hours to fill up your car with gas. Hurricanes aren't tornadoes. How the hell did you not fill your car up when the news guys telling you it's coming tomorrow? Fill your car. I filled my car with gas 2 days before it made the entire deployment that I had. I didn't need gas, so I'd have to wait in that line. That kind of stuff to me is base level preparedness. We all buy bottled water now, right? I don't know what happened to tap water over the years, but we quit drinking tap water. To have 2 of these in your house, like 2 cases instead of 1 when you go to Costco to buy an extra one, so you always had an extra one. You know what I mean? Like, I worked at a grocery store when I was young, and if we had bad weather in that grocery store, we sold out of all the bread, eggs, and cat food. Now, I don't know what the hell they did with their cat in normal days, but it's bread, eggs, and cat food. Here's the other thing about preparedness. If you lost your power, how are bread and eggs what's going to sustain your life? You know what I mean? Like, I got a bunch of raw eggs and I got some stale bread. Yay me. So there's some stuff that, like, your life and your area, like, this is a tornado-linked area, to have a communications plan with your family if the roads are done, to keep your car. Like, I'm a guy that I live my life that my car gets to half a tank of gas, I fill it up. I have a weather radio, you know what I mean? I keep my phone. You'll never catch, very seldomly ever catch my cell phone dead. But the world that we live in, everyone's cell phone's like at 3%, and they're always looking for a plug, I'm rambling. I know we have short on time, but go to an airport and realize that everything on the planet has a cell phone, and none of them keep the damn thing charged. They're waiting for like 2 seconds in the plug, and then Matt's putting his in the plug, and they're trying to get, like, how do you not charge your phone? You know what I mean? Like, it's your life device. So with that is the same thing. If you're on medication, if you're a life-saving medication, and you know that you're, not picking up your scripts, not trying to work with your physicians to get more stuff. If you're on at-home oxygen, to have some kind of plan with your DME to do that, because we have a very good safety net in America, in the United States, and every state you're in doesn't matter. There's a good safety net with police, fire, and EMS, public health, emergency management, healthcare. There's a good safety net, but we can't take care of everyone because, you know what I mean? Like, how do you not have some personal responsibility to do that? So I'll let these guys, but those are just on the top of my head. I could give you a whole list, but we got the time, and they're trying to give you the hook and shut up.
I would concur with Troy. I tell people all the time, it's a hard question to answer because it depends on the threats and risks that you have at your home, and I think it depends on where you're at. Troy's right. If I live in a hurricane area, that's something different than I have here in Central Illinois. Most likely thing for me to be stuck in Central Illinois is might be stuck in my basement for a few hours with my kids during severe weather. So I want to have stuff personally. I want to have stuff to keep my children occupied, to keep me occupied. Because again, the factors we have here, the likelihood of us suffering a disaster. I mean, there's a couple, I'll just be frank, there's a couple things that we're just not going to prepare for. And so I'll be honest, as an emergency manager, some emergency managers are like, oh no, we're going to get. There are some things that they haven't, we're all on our own. There's the emergency manager, we're all on our own for a short period of time. So focus on the things that are probably going to happen, not the things that
You don't need a volcano response.
Right.
You live in Illinois.
Tsunami. But that's what I think comfort things are important because of where we live. The most likely thing that we'll find ourselves is stuck in a base for a period of time, either by ourselves or with family members. And yeah. So.
And I'll say, I think that from the home base, right? Most of these, I think from, as a emergency manager or somebody in that field of public health planning and response, I think for us, I think it's important to be able to, personally pick up and go, right? So what do I need? Do I have my bags packed? Do I have stuff that I can bring with? And again, to Jason's point, I've got some kids at home, so I need to be able to know that if I need to leave this afternoon, there's a plan ready for them to be accounted for. They've got whatever daycare and whatever comforts of life they need for the time period that I'm going to be gone, right? So I think those things are important. Beyond that, I mean, I'm 20 years in, and we were just at a conference a couple weeks ago, and that was actually a question that went around the room of emergency managers to say, what do you have in your go bag, right? So, I know for me, there's of course medicine and toiletries and all that type of stuff. I don't go anywhere without sunscreen. I'm about the whitest guy in the world. I'm probably getting sunburned in this room, right? So, I mean, that's something that I know is non-negotiable because I don't want to get into, Houston in the middle of the summer. Without. So, personalizing it to those things, and then obviously, of course, on top of that, what you need to deploy as far as your workplace materials. And I'll say, and I'll expose my age here. I don't depend on the charging stations or to have my phone charged. I still print things out. Not everything, but back to the relationships. If there's one thing I print out, it's my contact information of all of my partners or my contacts that I have. Because if my phone goes dead and I can't get a hold of them, I still have an opportunity to work through either the gaps that I have in not having that technology or to be able to get in touch with them to be able to move things along.
Well, hopefully everybody enjoyed that insight shared by our three guests at a podcast at TEDCon here this past August. Guys, any closing comments on our adventure?
Hey, just a big thank you from all of us to Matt Ringenberg, Jason Marks, and Troy Erbentraut for joining us and making that podcast a very interesting and lively discussion, as you heard in the clips.
Mike, any reminders we need to throw at the folks?
Stay tuned for the next series of videos that we'll be posting here in our podcast. And so for now, just remember, we want to hear from you folks. We'd love to hear suggestions, comments, anything you want to provide to us. Don't forget our email address, readiness.rewired@gmail.com. Make sure you click that subscribe button, ding that bell so you know about our next video. And make sure you give us some feedback. Give us that thumbs up if you like us. Give us the thumbs down if you think we suck. And we hope to hear from you, and stop back again, will you?